Satan wants to take the authority of the world that God gave him, and he wants to give it to his son, the Antichrist, so that every knee will bow to him. Good morning, welcome. Thank you, Trinity members, patrons from around the world, for joining me this morning in our Sunday morning service. We pray that you will enjoy your time with us this morning and get filled with the knowledge, and so that you can be enriched and your soul can have something to hold on to for the next week at least. I'm going to start by quoting you an article in the New York Times, just to enlighten you about the developments so that you can be vigilant going forward. On the 10th of May 2024, this year, last week, there was a new variant, and the article says, what will that mean for spring and summer? Experts are closely watching KP2, now the leading variant. For most of this year, the JN1 variant of the bug, for an overwhelming majority of the cases. But now an offshoot variant called KP2 is taking off. The variants which made up just 1% of the cases in the United States in mid-March now make up over a quarter. Dr. David Ho, a virologist at Columbia University, but Dr. Ho has conducted early lab tests in the cells that suggest that slight difference in KP2's spike protein might make it better at evading our immune defenses and slightly more infectious than the JN1. This is just to alert you about something that has just emerged and is spreading quite quickly. The Times of India reports the same. New variants flirt in India, symptoms, severity to know. Now, this new variant is called flirt. Another article in Global News on the 10th of May, the flirt subvariant dominant also in Canada. What to know about the strain? These genetic cousins originating from JN1, the Omicron variant that fueled the winter surge, are now spreading nationwide, with one variant, KP2, quickly gaining dominance in Canada. The Express in UK fears new strain flirt could be harder to stop as cases surge around the world. The strain may be more resistant to existing pokes, experts have warned. So as you get enlightened, you can see that something new has just emerged. But this time, there's not going to be much hoo-ha about it. It's almost as if people are going to be caught by surprise, and the numbers are most probably going to be hidden. So just so you know, even when you search through your social media, you will see many people that pass away on a daily basis. And these are young folks. And you'll find many church people falling victim to something that seems strangely unknown. So with that, I ask you to be more prayerful, for God to guide and lead you, and to offer His divine protection. And when you're moving around, don't take that protection for granted. You need to be vigilant as well. I'm going to start this morning's sermon by mentioning to you a quote It's an anecdote of sorts. And the title of that anecdote is The Metaphors of the Boiling Frog or the Totalitarian Tiptoe. I'm going to explain to you what that means after we read this brief description. The totalitarian tiptoe or the boiling frog suggests that rather than a sudden or dramatic takeover, totalitarianism can creep in incrementally, often unnoticed or under the guise of benevolent intentions, something for good, for the good of all. The term tiptoe implies quiet, stealthy, and calculated approach, where small, seemingly insignificant steps are taken to consolidate power, control, and surveillance. Each step may appear harmless or even beneficial when you look at it in isolation, but collectively they can lead to a cumulative erosion of individual freedoms, civil liberties, and democratic institutions. Totalitarian tiptoe can manifest in various ways, such as gradual expansion of governmental powers, increased surveillance and data collection, suppression of dissenting voices, free speech. We've seen that roll out in the last few years, especially in the mainstream media. Manipulation of information, we've seen that also. Erosion of privacy, we've seen that also. And centralization of decision making and control. We started to see that this Health of the World organization wants to be centralized in terms of control. So we can see all these things that are working towards the totalitarian rule, but they've done it in a tiptoe fashion. Now, the boiling frog method suggests that, when you want to boil a frog, if you put it directly in boiling water, it will jump out. But if you put it in the water first, it's cold, and then slowly you heat the temperature of the water. And until such time that the frog boils without realizing that it is a trap. And so that is how totalitarian tiptoe works. It works in slow increments, and the aim is to have total domination, subjugation, and control. But an important thing for the people who want to make this tiptoe approach, they need to identify what the outcome is going to be. And so when you know the outcome, then you tiptoe towards that until you get your outcome. But in order for you and I to work out that this is happening, we have to realize what they want the outcome to be. So it works both ways. The bottom line is you must know the outcome first, and so you can recognize the tiptoe approach. Now, if the frog knew that they want to boil him, he wouldn't have entered there in the first place. There would have been resistance. And so this is what I want to warn you about, so that you don't get sucked in so much so into the system of the world that you don't see that you are boiling. And this is where Jesus comes in. And we went into much detail explaining to you his protection over his own. While the world will boil, somehow in a divine manner, although you are in the bowl with the world, that water that you are in will not boil. And you will be given God's protection. He mentioned that in the book of Revelation. The devil's outcome is a little different from the human beings that are being used as his agents. They they are carrying out a plan for them to be the elite dominant ones. But Satan's plan, on the other hand, is to dominate God's creation, overtake it, dominate it, especially those that are made in God's image. More especially, people who belong to the called out ones. In biblical terms, his agents, the devil's agents, want a one world government where they can make control centralized. And that is also mentioned in the Bible. And the only ones who will have protection from that in some divine way is those who have the seal of God on their heads. Now, at every step of the way, Satan wants to thwart God's plan. And he will, unless you are in and under God's covering. Now, whatever God promises, the devil uses that to tread upon the earth. Philippians chapter 2 tells us this, that at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth. Now the devil wants to introduce his son, the son of perdition, the Antichrist. You see, God introduced his son, so the devil wants to introduce his son. And God said every knee will bow to his son, and the devil wants to make every knee to bow to his son, the Antichrist. And so this is the reason why, in a spiritual way, not in the physical way that these cabal members want, but I'm talking about in the very high principalities, the intention is to make knees bow to the Antichrist. Whose knees? Human beings that were made in the image of God. The book of Revelation chapter 9, they were commanded not to harm the grass or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. He also wants to make a mark on his people who bow to him, to his son, the Antichrist. And in order for you to bow to that system of the Antichrist, you have to take the mark to live in this world. And while you're living in this world, the system that is created, the tiptoe system, is going to boil you slowly. So you can see the narrative. God wants to place his seal, his mark on his children, on their foreheads. That's what's written. And Satan wants to place his mark on his children on their foreheads. He wants to more especially steal from the called out ones. The rest already belong to him. He wants to steal from the called out ones, put his mark on them so that they bow, and he can rob God. Yet God called these people out, that he can rob God of those people. And this is why it's so important for you to understand this message, because it will help you to transition from called out ones to chosen ones. So long as you don't bow, in other words, submit to the system that is being operated, in other words, that you don't be part of the group that is willing to sit in the pot and boil. Now, I've shown you over the months and years the incremental ways in which the devil's children is using to destroy the earth. And this destruction is being done so that they put fear in people so that they can submit to the rules they want to put in place. Now, this destruction of the earth that's taking place, to many who are in the boiling pot, it looks like it's nature that's doing that, and especially climate change now. But God, did you know this? That God mentions that this destruction will not be a destruction caused by Him. It will not be destruction caused by nature. It will be destruction caused by people. I mean, God saw this and gave His servant John, the Revelator, to put it in the Bible. Let me prove it to you. The book of Revelations chapter 11. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come. And the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, small and great. And you should destroy those who destroy the earth. Wow. You see, God knew this was not a natural phenomenon that's going to destroy the earth. He knew that it's going to be people. And the prophecy says that God is going to destroy those people. So these ones that are running around like fairy godmother over the planet, their time will come. Now, in order for them to, the end goal, you look at the outcome first, as I said. In order to have this one world government, they have to create crisis. And that crisis can only be created in their eyes through the destruction of the earth. So people in fear that their livelihoods, their food supply, all these things are going to be crippled. They won't be able to eat. They won't be able to survive. They won't provide for their children. In order to facilitate the one world system, they have to begin with destroying the earth. In that last verse we read, destroy those who destroy the earth. And we look at the Greek word that is used for earth. It's gen. And gen comes from Greek and Latin, where it has the meaning race or birth, born or produced. Anything produced, born, created by God, that is going to be destroyed. It goes into more detail in different interpretations, and it means to go into the land. That's what it means. Gen means land. So the land will be destroyed. And what does the land produce? Crops. The land is the reason why people survive, because they have something to eat. The land is cultivated. You remember in the garden, in the life of Adam and Eve, we read that God removed them from the garden and there was nothing to cultivate outside. And so Adam and Eve were starving. They didn't have resources anymore. And the devil knows that if you are in that position, that many people will cry out. Now one of this main mascot that we see in the world, Mr. Gates, listen to what he had to say on climate change. Watch.
You believe this is the toughest challenge humanity has ever faced?
Absolutely. It's way greater than the, and it needs a level of cooperation that would be unprecedented.
Of us sitting around here, what specifically would be impacted?
Well, this cement would be made in a different way. The steel in the building would be different. The meat in the burger is a big deal. These, all this plastic and paper, potatoes, all the tractors, the transport.
Trucks that bring them to this restaurant. All that has to change.
Hey, when you're going to zero, you don't get to skip anything.
Now, if you want to know the end of days time, Jesus predicted that these things are going to happen. You remember he told us that, see, as soon as man has reached that ability to cause that destruction that he spoke about in Revelation of the land, then you know that the end is near. And Jesus said, if you destroy the land, there's going to be famine. There's going to be disease outbreak. There's going to be floods. There's going to be drought. Jesus mentioned all these things, but it will only happen when man has the ability to destroy the earth. And we've reached that place in time where that is now possible. We've seen what NASA wrote last week in a document that was in 1996. They have the ability to control the weather and use it as a weapon. Now, in this last couple of weeks alone, we've seen floods in Kenya, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Brazil, in China, and many other places we don't really have time to go into. However, you need to know this, that this is now abnormal escalation. And what does the tiptoe governments want us to believe? It is climate change. So suddenly, when the agenda is really pushed hard, we're getting abnormal weather patterns. And one of the main reasons for the change in this is so that the land gets so flooded that farmers won't be able to plant crops. And when crops are short, food becomes short. And so the answer would be seeds that are made by the Gates company, Monsanto and so forth, which are modified genetically so that they can use, you see, God's birth, God's creation is now compromised. It's no longer what God made. It's Satan's wisdom that is given to his agents to create something. So the lands have to be either sold off to the governments or use the products that these people sell. And I told you before, when India and the farmers there were forced to buy that crop, which cost more than what they made, many of them killed themselves, committed suicide. And you'll see around the world, the farms are either being bought up, because that's the source of your food supply. It's being flooded, there is drought, and all land producing places, the places where food is being produced in large quantities. Now, you see, if you know science, and this is why knowledge is so important. If you know science, true science, then you will be able to recognize that this is manipulation, not natural. And for example, you know, one of the concerns, they'll show you now, people like BBC and so forth, they'll take you to the glaciers that are in the north, and they'll show you the large amounts of melting that takes place. And they say this is because of global warming. Now, I'm going to teach you something about these ice caps. But I'm going to read to you an article, the Ocean Service article, that will confirm what I'm saying. What is the global ocean conveyor belt? The global ocean conveyor belt is a constantly moving system of deep ocean circulation. And listen to how it's driven. Temperature and salinity. Now let me explain that. In the earth, the oceans, let's say you drop a floating bubble and you drop it in the United Kingdom beach. It will run with the currents. It's like a conveyor belt. You stand on the conveyor belt, it takes you from one point. This is how the ocean operates. It takes that air bubble and it will move it around the earth. And it will take about 500 years before it gets back to the place where it was dropped from. I want you to picture this. There's a conveyor belt. And that system is introduced by God. And it helps with the movement of plankton for sea life. It helps with all sorts of ecosystems under the sea. Without that conveyor belt that is naturally driven by temperature and salinity, that's the on and off switch that causes the belt to move. Now, in order for that salt water to have an on switch so that it starts moving, it needs pure water to be melted into it so that there's density and there's less dense water. And the temperature of the cold glacier, so temperature and salinity, that means pure water, there's no salinity. The temperature of the snow that's melting, of the glacier, is lower than the salt water. And so that mixture of the two drives the conveyor belt of the ocean. Without the melting of those snow caps, the conveyor belt will come to an almost halt, which means the earth will be robbed of all sorts of things. So when they show you the ice caps melting and you see scientists and geologists, they come out with much concern. Listen, this has been continuously happening since God made it. Without it, so there's no need for concern. You see, when you have knowledge, you understand that everything done is man-made and man-manipulated to create the fulfillment of an agenda, the outcome. So God is giving us a glimpse of what to expect and how the pot is going to boil. And it's up to us to see. And this is why I'm filling you with this oil, so that when you see it, you run towards God, not run into the world system. Oh man, I hope you're understanding this. Now you know this boiling that has been going on with digital money and so forth. We see it now. They're tiptoeing faster. If they control people's food, if they control people's money for food, they will control the people. And so we listened recently to the president of the European Union, the Christian Lagarde lady, and listen to what she just said.
If the government were ever to digitize currency, your freedoms would evaporate. They could zero out your bank account and make you impoverished for being disobedient. You would be a serf at best. And with that in mind, you should know that central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are about to become the norm in Europe. The president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, has just said that Europeans will not be able to use more than $1,000 in cash anymore.
Now we have in Europe this threshold. Above 1,000 euros, you cannot pay cash. If you do, you are on the grey market. So you take your risk. You get caught, you are fined, or you go in jail.
So you go to jail for spending your own money if they don't control it.
So in Europe, unless you have digital money, you cannot purchase anything over 1,000 euros. And it's going to get worse. Tiptoe, then it will be complete. Now, Mascot Bill doesn't want to plant trees, which is the natural answer to pollution in the atmosphere, ozone layer depletion, climate change. That's the answer. It's part of the answer. But listen, there is no problem. But because there is no problem, Mascot Bill says he doesn't want to be, it's not good to plant trees. No. You have to listen for yourself.
I don't use some of the less proven approaches.
Such as?
I don't plant trees.
There's a lot of people who are very enamored with trees. We've got trees on this stage. Some people would even say that if you just planted enough trees, it could take care of the climate issue altogether.
And that's complete nonsense.
Okay.
I mean, are we the science people or are we the idiots? Which one do we want to be? Are we the idiots?
Now, there is a book that is written on behalf of the Club of Rome. I mentioned this group to you before. That book is called The First Global Revolution. Now, the members of this Club of Rome featured some of the main characters. But here's the thing, the Club of Rome is a non-profit, non-governmental organization consisting of rulers and leaders and politicians and business people. It's like a think tank for them, between you and I, to outcome first, to work the outcome first. So they are there to drive a process. And in that book that I just showed you, this is what's written. The common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and in the interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which demands the solidarity of all peoples. Now there we go. In writing, they say we have an end goal, we have an outcome. And to get to this outcome, these are the steps, especially in the end of days. So Jesus warned us in advance. When we start to see these things happening, know that the time is near. These members of the Club of Rome, they constitute, well, this is a little bit of an older photo, but the Queen of England, Prime Minister former David Cameron, the mascot of the WEF, Justin Trudeau, many of the royal family. Now, here's the thing. It is not permitted to reveal the members of the Club of Rome unless the person wants it to be revealed. They have to keep it a secret. And only certain people's faces and names are known. But the rest is kept secret. I wonder why. If it was all for the good of humanity. This man, one of the eugenists we spoke about many times, Rockefeller. And if you look for this, the fact checkers will say he didn't say it. But listen, there's evidence that he did. But here's the thing. This is his quote. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. The problem is not that people are uneducated. The problem is that they are educated just enough to repeat what they are taught, but not to question what they are taught. You see, when you're in that water boiling, they have to train you to be able to boil. Let's read something else Rockefeller did. And I can guarantee you many of you did not know this. The title of this article that I'm going to read to you is called The Origins of Education and Mandatory Schooling. So who made education necessary and mandatory, and who started it? None other than John D. Rockefeller. Let's read. In 1902, when John D. Rockefeller created the General Education Board in conjunction with Frederick T. Gates. Gates was a close friend, business and personal advisor to Rockefeller. The General Education Board was responsible for funding the American public school system and providing over $100 million in 1902, while continuing their support beyond 1902. If we followed the money, the General Education Board was responsible for the creation of the American public school system. Does education not play a role in manipulating and the consciousness of human beings? By consciousness manipulation, I mean trying to influence the way that human beings perceive the environment, the boiling water around them. Early age schooling. From an early age, we are forced into mandatory schooling system that requires and encourages youth to attend for a large portion of their human life for 6 hours a day. Each child is required to learn the accepted version of reality. The reality is your water is not boiling, in order to fit into the specific mold desired by the elite. Just like television, a large part of school is simply programming. It's ironic how the same families behind the funding are responsible for many inhumane atrocities that took place throughout history. They are also behind big oil, big pharma, food and other industries that are becoming more transparent as of late. Kids who do not fit into the system and do not resonate with it are usually labeled and medicated. So if you're not able to learn things, if you're not able to rewrite what they teach you, if you are not able to get high marks with that, they say you have an attention deficit syndrome, and they label you and they give you medication for it. Oh my goodness. Listen, let's go forward. Essentially, the whole point of school is to shape the reality of the student. We are taken from a very early age, put into the institution. From there we are shown how the world works and what we need to do to survive in it. School literally paints the perception that we need to do well in order to have a job so that we can make money and pay our bills. It has nothing to do with the type of growth the human being needs. The concept of grades and marks do not signify any level of intelligence. In school, we are shown the idea of an authority figure, how the world works, and what intelligence is. Never confuse education with intelligence. Albert Einstein. Just so that you know, the same Rockefeller education system is now dominant in most of parts of the world. And for South Africans, you need to know that that same system is employed even now more heavily than before. You see, because to program the children, they must be mandatory in school. Wow. Now, here's something interesting. In the 60s, I think it was, NASA, they wanted more geniuses. So they gave this man George Land, his name is George Land, to do research on finding smart children, gifted children, geniuses. And so he did a study. Now George Land's research and writings suggest that the traditional education system, particularly schooling, can stifle creativity and lead to a decline in creative thinking. He argued that the emphasis on rote memorization, standardization, and the conformity in school that can suppress children's natural curiosity and creativity. Land's work, particularly in his book Breakpoint and Beyond 1973. I want you to watch this real quickly.
It was a study that was done in the 1960s, and it was commissioned by NASA because they wanted to know how to hire more geniuses. So they hired George Land and his team to go out and figure out what makes a genius. So they started with a group of 5-year-olds, and they gave them a creativity test. The way they defined genius was, how do you use your creative imagination to solve problems? And what they found was, of this group of 5-year-olds, 98% qualified as geniuses. Then they came back 5 years later when this group was 10 years old, and it was down to 30%. 5 years later at 15, it was down to 12%. And then I think they just kind of gave up in disgust. But George Land took it further and went out and surveyed adults and found that only 2% of adults. He attributed this to school, 100% to school, that you would take a population, 98% genius, and dumb them down to 2%. He said uncreative behavior and thinking is learned.
I want you to see how the water was boiling. And more importantly, how the education system was set up to tell you it's not boiling. You can manage it. This is how you need to survive in this boiling water. Now, here's an interesting thing. Why does Satan want this totalitarian authority? For him to dominate human beings. Why? Well, it's because God operates on the same system. God is a totalitarian authority over humanity. He has a right as creator to be in charge of all of us. But when he is in charge with love, with compassion, with caring for his children, for he created them. So he doesn't dominate with an iron rod beating people. That's why he leaves people to do whatever they do, and they face their own consequences. He doesn't force people to do anything. He doesn't manipulate people. He tells them, this is what I want you to do, and now it's up to you to do it. And he treats people for all of their lives with compassion. He died so that his compassion can wipe away every blemish of sin that you've done. And so his authoritarian rule is different because they want to manipulate and force people. They want to dominate and torture people. They want to boil people up. And so there is no compassion. But they'll have an image of benevolence. Now you see, this authority that God has, authoritarian quality, he took that authority and he gave it to Jesus, his son. I want you to see. Matthew 28. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. So who's the totalitarian authority? Jesus. So what Satan did, God gave him authority on the earth, this planet here. He is the prince of the world. And he took his authority and he wants to transfer it to his son, the Antichrist. And he wants every knee to bow to his son. Oh, man. Now, Jesus took his authority and he gave it to his chosen ones. First, he's called out ones, and if they follow, they become chosen. So, Jesus took that authority and he gave it to his children. Satan took that authority and gave it to his children. And while our authority is spiritual, their authority is physical. That's why these agents of darkness, this cabal, has been entrusted by Satan because they bow their knee to him. They become his children. That's why Jesus even cursed some of them before you, like your father, the devil. The authority he has over this world, he gave it. And same thing he wanted to offer to Jesus. Whatever is given to me, I'll give it to you. Now he's given it to his children, and we know who they are now, many of them. You know, in God's kingdom, when you've given authority, you use it to serve. When Satan gives authority, he uses it to dominate. And that's why when Jesus came, the King of Kings walked on the planet, he was in servitude to his brothers. He showed what true totalitarianism is. That when you have the power, you serve with it. In this world, when you have the power, you dominate with it. Now, there's an interesting allegory by the Greek philosopher Plato. And he used this analogy of a cave in his masterpiece called The Republic. This cave, there were people born inside this cave. They never saw outside. They were born in this cave. They had chains chained to their legs. They couldn't come out of the cave. They were inside. And so they were born slaves inside this cave. And this allegory tells us that there's some puppeteers that are behind them. And they're burning a fire. And that fire is hitting them from the back, and it's creating shadows on the wall in front of them. And so for the entire lives, they have no idea that a puppeteer is behind them, burning something and creating the shadows for them to see. And so one day, one of those people in the cave, they escaped. And they went outside. And they saw for the first time reality. They saw trees, they saw birds singing, they saw the waves, and they saw the beauty of everything that was made. And that person came back inside the cave to tell his brothers what really is the truth. But you know what those people in the cave did? According to this allegory, they wanted to kill him. They refused to listen to him. They were used to being in this cave and trying to figure out the shadows on the wall. They didn't want to believe that something outside is better, that this was their reality. Their reality was shadows, which was not real. But reality was outside. Now this is the exact same thing Jesus came to do. He came to tell you the truth, that this world is not everything. That what you see here is temporary. It is, but there's something beyond here that is more beautiful. And if you submit to the authority of this world, to become in that boiling water, willing to boil, because you are in pursuit, that school taught you that I'm in pursuit of this, I must follow this rule. You know, this is why, you know, people say that people who trust the education system to get a good job and stuff, they can never be rich. Because all they teach you to be is a worker. They want you to be a worker when you are educated. No matter how much grades you get, how high grades, you'll always be a worker. Whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, but you'll never run a business if your creative mind has been extinguished. And so God is trying to tell you that whilst you're in this world, recognize that everything you see is not real. It never is, never was. There's something more valuable on the other side of the cave. And that's the truth. And that's the truth that will set you free from being a captive in the system. This is exactly what the Jews crucified him for. They thought he was coming to set them free from the rule of the Romans. When he didn't, they turned against him. And so many will ask, how do we get set free? No, you have to free, your mind has to be free. It's like you trapped inside the mind. That brain of yours traps you here, and all you can think and see of is, I want to get rich. I want to live the good life. I want to do this. And there's a little nudge that's competing to be the authority within you. It's your soul. And many don't listen to it. So in the same way, your brain, I taught you many times this. We are made of body, mind and soul. The mind is your spirit. Your spirit is the ultimate consciousness and decision maker of your entire being. The brain directs you because the brain wants to be the authoritarian ruler of your being. The brain. The soul also is competing to be authoritarian leader of your being. Now, it's up to your mind or your spirit to follow one path or the other. The one path is the shadows on the cave wall. The other part is reality. Now, have you not noticed when you listen to your brain? Let me just put this way. Most people in this world will want to pursue what the brain perceives as success, the good life. And most people will never achieve it in a lifetime. And so when you settle with that reality, you realize that giving totalitarian rule to your brain is a mistake, because once you do that, you will get disappointment. You will get hurt. You will be a person who is not afraid to hurt other people to get that good life. You will be unforgiving if somebody robs you of that good life you seek. You will have hate in you because somebody has come in the way of that good life you want. And so there's nothing good comes out of giving your brain authoritarian rule over your being. But when you give the other side, your soul doesn't care about anything else but peace, love, and joy. And with that, you don't cause hurt, you don't cause pain, not only to others, but to your own self. Because when the brain wants you to do something and you end up hurting someone, you end up hurting yourself, because you will never get what you're looking for. Let me just paint that for you. You will never be where your brain tells you, I want to be in a certain year's time. That's your brain forcing you in a particular direction. It wants to control your being. And as soon as you start walking in that direction, you start tramping on people. You start hurting even your parents. You start hurting your family members. You hurt people you work with. And most of all, when you don't reach where you were supposed to do, what it does, it hurts your own spirit. And that's when you start to get sickly. That's when you start to need the Kabbal's medication. And all these things are because you gave authoritarian rule. So the whole world system, including your very being, operates on the tiptoe approach. And your brain has been doing that from the time you're born, going to school. They feed your brain even more. So there's competition for the better brain, the better brain power, and nobody seeks the purity of soul in school. And so slowly and gradually, they're feeding that brain. Because that's what the world does. Now I want you to dust yourself off. I want you to dust yourself off of everything the brain convinced you is real. These are just shadows. Reality is beyond here. You will get rid of the disappointment. You will get rid of the hurt when you realize that there is more to life than this physical reality. And you'll say to yourself, Lord, I want you to examine who has been in control of you. If you're suffering from all these negative things, there's a very good chance that you gave authority, totalitarian rule, to your brain over your soul. Your soul has just gone quiet. It's dominated. I want you to take that authority and give it back to your soul. And you deny the brain. It wants you to hate. It wants you to curse. It wants you to kill. It wants you to steal. Some people even steal from their parents, from their siblings, not to mention God, just so that they can have a good life. And this day, I want you to examine why has your life gone through that path. Stop right where you are. And I want you to give your entire being to God and start listening to that inner voice. That's only if you're a called out one. And when you become called out and you listen to that voice, you move towards being chosen. And I want you to do that starting right now. Can I pray with you? Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, you've come to show us what awaits us after our eyes close. And many don't want to believe. This is why they killed you when you came, to show them there's more. When you came from beyond the cave to come in and tell us, many killed you because they thought that was their reality. And Father, Lord, let many people not reject what you are telling them this morning through my voice. I ask you to touch only those that you've selected, pre-selected from the beginning of time. And Lord, let their coming into your kingdom be hasty, so that your coming for us is quicker. I plead your blood over your children. Cover them, protect them. As the world seeks to boil them, I pray, Lord, that your divine hand will be upon them in every way. I cover them all in Jesus' name. Everybody said, Amen. God bless you, beloved. Have yourself a most beautiful week. I pray that God continues to protect you and keep you. See you next week. God bless.